Hi, Brian. Welcome to Venture with Grace.
Hi, so happy to be here. Great to see you again, Grace, after all these years.
Exactly. It's been so crazy because Brian was in one of these books. So it's been such a long journey since like literally it was like 10 years ago. I was like, in the book era, but now I feel like you have like grown so much since we collab on the chapter. And okay, so before we dive in, I want to give a quick shout out to our amazing sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Nebius, the ultimate cloud for AI innovators. Nebius provides AI infrastructure you can count on, combining reliability and speed with flexibility and engineering support unmatched by hyperscalers. AI leaders like Meta, Shopify, and Higgsfield already partner with Nebius to run their AI workloads. Plus, venture-backed startups can save up to 150K on compute costs when they apply for access. Visit Nebius.com or Nebius.com/startup to learn more. Okay. So I want to start with like your journey on like the last we met when you were working on your first company, and I remember our chapter was about like fundraising, and then you wrote the most like hilarious like chapter of all time. And I feel like maybe we could talk about your journey for the audience who first time met you here. So you were in investment banking, and then you co-founded a company in the, I would identify as like is that considered as green tech or like deep tech, or what do you consider you guys are in?
Yeah,
In the
well,
packing, the
we
packing.
got started in 2015. I don't even, some of these terms weren't that popular yet. We call ourselves a sustainable materials company. And yeah, I think probably broadly in clean tech.
Mhm.
But yeah, the idea was we were gonna, we created a material that could replace styrofoam in the cold chain. So meaning keeping things at proper temperature while it's being transported, like food and pharmaceutical products. And we wanted to create a material that was better in many ways, in performance, its ability to keep things safe, but also in its impact afterlife. So we created a material made from plants and paper, several different materials. And yeah, it was maybe a bit ahead of its time in 2015, but it ended up growing quite large. And today I think we have over 500 employees and continuing to grow and quite profitable. So it's been great.
It's so crazy. I want to say so like I met you when the company was like I think seed or something, and then now it's been like already series D, and you guys were doing very very well, and you recently just started a new company.
Mhm.
And I want to start with like, what do you think was like the core lessons that you learned during the first company, because you were running it for like it's been like 13 years, and then you were with it basically the entire time. And um what would you say is like core lessons that you have learned from that journey running that company?
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson was do something really hard. I think if you find a pain point, it can be fairly easy to grow and offer something that's able to help the pain point. But in order to build something more enduring that would last several cycles, you have to build something really hard and really try to think of what's the ultimate solution here, and try to work towards that as quickly as possible. Um, and if you do that, it'll just be really hard. That's
Mhm.
the sign that you're doing the right thing. If it's really difficult to get it to work technologically, um, and um, so that was really our focus going into Markups AI, was kind of viewing it as an opportunity to do something really difficult. I think it was even more important with markups, being in AI and contracts. It's one of the most crowded spaces. I think in TemperPack with sustainable materials in 2015, it was actually not crowded at all.
Mhm.
Um, and so we felt in order to build something that could stand out in the noise, it really was going to have to be very difficult to build and really try to build a different level of automation and accuracy. Um, so yeah, lot of other lessons. I think the other one I would say is every crisis is probably not a crisis, and every huge victory is probably not as big as you think. But you just gotta move it, make progress every single day.
I totally agree. Would you say you would pick the same sector to go into entrepreneurship back then?
Yeah, I think we got incredibly lucky. It started with two friends, James and Charles, who are materials engineers, and we had lots of different ideas for what we wanted to start. The first idea that was anywhere close to what we ultimately did was energy efficient refrigerator, and we ultimately were just looking for where there was a big pull, where there was just an overwhelming need. And styrofoam had been around for 50 plus years, and nobody liked it, but it was becoming a much bigger pain point because for the first time ever, you had regular shipments of styrofoam, meaning every week or every month, of medicine to people's homes, because a lot of new medicines coming out were biologics that were temperature sensitive. So not just pills you get at the pharmacy, but things that have to be properly stored at cold temperature when it's being delivered. And then there were all these meal kits coming out, like HelloFresh, that if you get a styrofoam box in the mail, maybe you don't love it, but if you get it every single week, it really starts to weigh on you. So there was this huge pull there, and it wasn't our first, second, or third idea, but once we found that overwhelming pull, it was how can we keep up with the demand, and that basically explained the next 10 years.
I love that. I feel like to identify something that actually is like an impactful problem, and then like people are, instead of creating something like super, I would say super hot, but like actually just creating something that people use daily is like a very important thing I've learned from like watching you build your company. And speaking of Markups AI, I feel like it is such a, I was waiting for someone to create something like this because of, as a day-to-day consumer, like I'm not gonna spend like 600K on Harvey or any equivalent. No, no shade on them. Like obviously they're very, very successful, but let's start with like Markups AI's product. If you want to do a demo, we could do a demo here as well.
Okay, yeah. Let me show. I'll just explain it real quick, and then I'll pull something up. So we created an agent called Agent Marko, and it's an AI colleague. And basically, you just email back and forth with Agent Marko like you would a legal colleague. And Agent Marko can revise, draft, analyze any document, all custom to you. We have legal engineers that train Agent Marko on behalf of each of our clients. And it's not a platform. So virtually, there's lots of legal tech out there. Virtually everything is a platform, meaning you're logging in, you have to configure it, it has to integrate with everything else you're doing. There's a lot of training involved. And the result is a lot of people are buying these AI legal platforms, but there's not a lot of usage there. And what we felt was an easier way to use AI, and ultimately where it was going would be a colleague that could do a lot of the same work that people can do. And it would interact with you in a similar way that people would interact with you. And so it was an incredibly ambitious goal for 2023 when we got started. And it really took 18 months or so to get it to work well. Just as it needed the models to get a little bit better, and then also develop some new approaches. But we've been growing incredibly quickly over the last, call it 9-12 months. And with very large companies mostly, but increasingly startups as well, as we've gotten more automated and gotten the price point down as well. So I'll pull up a demo.
Okay.
You're putting me on the spot a little bit, but I got something here I can just show real quick. All right. Let me see if I can
Present or invite.
There we go. Was it the whole screen? Okay, there we go. All right. So everyone knows the feeling when you get in a contract that it's the last thing you probably want to deal with, especially if it's on the vendor side and you're paying money. If it's from a customer, maybe there's some good feeling, but ultimately going through it and marking it up, it's one of those exercises that it's hard to do really well. It's kind of like you can only mess it up. And it was our least favorite part. My co-founder started a company called Vault Health before. And certainly when I was at TemperPack, dealing with all the contracts from vendors and customers and investors was one of the worst parts of the job. And even after we built out a legal team, there's always a bottleneck. And so we really viewed AI as an opportunity to offload the main bulk of that responsibility. And so in this example, pretending that I'm at a company called XYZ Inc. and got in a MSA from a potential SaaS vendor. And rather than downloading this and marking it up myself like it's 2023 and we don't live in the future already, or getting this into Claude Cowork or GPT and trying to prompt my way to get it to do what I want, all I'm going to do is forward it to my AI colleague, Agent Marko, that's been specially trained for this type of task. And the way that we do that is just via custom email address. So we give all of our clients a custom email address that gives them access to a custom version of Agent Marko that's been specially trained on their preferences by our legal engineers. So we'll do that training for you. And then we ask Agent Marko to please review. And then Agent Marko comes back, usually in 15 minutes or so, with a red line, tells us what playbook it used, and it summarizes its work. And then most importantly, it gives us a red line. And the red line is going to be really surgical. It's going to change the fewest number of words possible, but also change as much as is necessary. So basically just looks like a really smart human legal professional did this. And we can fully customize it as well. Any part of this, the email, comments in the document, the revisions. And so, yeah, it's been really awesome seeing how this was, virtually impossible just a couple of years ago, and now is getting more and more automated and able to handle now documents up to 120 pages.
I have so many questions there. So one is obviously, I think the most obvious one, it would be what's the difference between this and ChatGPT? I'm sure you guys have, as you mentioned, legal engineer. I'm coughing too. I'm I don't really know what's
it's contagious.
So yeah. Through a screen, particularly. But anyway, so when what's a primary difference between if I'm using Agent Marko versus ChatGPT?
Yeah, so ChatGPT is all about responding to what you are telling it to do. Mm-hmm. And if you're high level on what you want, you ask for a revision of a sales document, it's going to respond with an average of what every other company has done, essentially. And so it's going to give you a very standard review. It's going to catch most things that are really egregious, but anything that is on the fence, it's just going to take a guess at. And it's not going to be tailored for your organization or your preferences. And if you're an early stage startup, you may not have preferences, right? You may just say, I just want to make sure I'm not signing something crazy. And GPT is a great resource for that. But as you get more mature, you start to realize there are things that you actually care about, that there are terms here that may make sense for you that don't make sense for another company. And it's really difficult to work with GPT or Claude Cowork when you have a lot of preferences. And so what we do is create very detailed playbooks that have 500,000 preferences baked within them. And Agent Marko will follow each one of them. And our legal engineers build that out, but then Agent Marko is the one that really follows it. And so all of that preference starts to feel like a colleague, meaning they know your organization, they know your preferences, and it allows it to be a lot more automated. You're not following up with a lot of prompts. You're not fixing all sorts of AI issues. these are instructions that have been highly tested and built from your historical contract data. And so I think where everybody in legal AI is trying to get to is that there's this all-powerful trusted source that will just negotiate everything on your behalf, and you can trust it and know that it's really good, and only get involved when it's something unusual is happening. But anything usual, anything routine, like a standard vendor contract or a sales contract, if you have a trusted colleague, then if you're the co-founder or you're in sales or in finance, it'd be great to just offload that. And I think what we've seen with AI so far is it's nowhere close to that. It can do some of the easier stuff. It can maybe give you a little bit of a boost, but it's somebody needs to get really involved. And I think what we are shooting for is having Agent Marko be that first really trusted resource. But to do that, it has to know your preferences really well. It has to be highly tested. That's really what we've developed. And I think why we've been growing so fast over the last year.
I think there's like two questions, and then we can jump into the business side as well. So from the product end, I think one of the things, because I was literally reviewing a contract last night at like literally 1 a.m. And I think the major problem of the thing is like typically I just like ask, let's say ChatGPT, like, is this does this like fitting into the bar of like blah 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 blah, like, so my concern. And I think the concern for each contract is different because of like there's different client and then the different focuses, and like your negotiation power is like very nuanced because like with the bigger client and they may need X, Y, and Z, and then you just kind of go along with it. But if you just apply it to like everybody else, it's probably difficult. And the other question I had was like, I think to suggest the legal language, that's important. That's very important. But however, I feel like a lot of it's like you have to negotiate as a human. You have to make sure the other person understands your concern that you're addressing. If I just send back like, 5 red lines and then they may get offended because of this is like, bad or whatever, like, how do you think about like from the business angle? I know that both of your parents are lawyers, and like how, like, I guess, like, how do you think about it as a business owner and then as well as a lawyer? And then you mentioned about legal engineer. I would love to know like what that is. Is that a legal person or like,
yeah, no, and it's a brand new word, really, but and I would say actual engineers rightly take offense to anyone calling themselves
like there was like people hiring event engineers. I'm like, what does that even mean? Like,
yeah, engineer is the most watered down term of 2026. That's for sure. I'll come back to that. I think contracts can be very human, negotiations, and how you redline matters a lot. Did you strike an entire sentence and just put in your own? That is kind of like an FU, right? Because it's like, I'm not going to work with your language. You read my sentence, right? And I think what good lawyers do is they work with the language in the contract to change the fewest number of words so that it's more clear what is actually the issue. And it's a polite thing to do to get really surgical in how to revise documents so that the other side can efficiently review it. So that's number one. How not all red lines are equal. But secondly, what can be as important as the red line is the comment explaining the red line to the counterparty. Why is this important to your organization? And why is this kind of, a reasonable position to take? That is so much of what we build out, in addition to the red lines itself, are the comments that explain this in a really human way. And what we ultimately, when we got started, we were doing NDAs. And, I think everybody kind of saw, okay, AI will be used for NDAs. There's only so many things you can do. And it turns out NDAs can get quite complex, but that was right. You can virtually program every rule that could come up in an NDA. And so the question was, well, what about a sales agreement? That can get quite a bit more complex. What about 90 pages? And what we saw is it's actually just scaling up of the number of preferences and rules that you have. And the models definitely needed to get smarter to be able to apply those rules across more varied contexts. But whatever rules are going on in your head as you're looking through a contract, you can codify and AI can follow those. It just needs to understand what's going on in your head. And there's a cost to articulating all those. But that's really what we do. We as efficiently as possible, create custom instruction sets and then manage them on behalf of our clients. And all of that's a really boring way to say that we build them an AI colleague that negotiates contracts for them in the same way that they would.
As a user, do I go in and then put in my instruction, like, on ChatGPT, there's a setting that you can create a project and then like you just type in like a bunch of stuff, and then that become like a universal instruction for that particular domain. Is it similar on markups?
Actually, it's even easier than that. So you just treat it like a colleague. So you just send an email and say, please review. It can be a very high level discussion or instruction. And then Agent Marko will review it according to many hundreds of preferences that our legal engineers have written for it on what to do in that type of situation. And the way that we build those out are, one, we have standard playbooks that would apply for a particular type of company. So if you're a startup and this is a vendor contract, we're going to have a playbook that will be very similar to what you probably want. And you can either start with that, or we can take contracts that you've revised in the past and use that to derive what your preferences would be. And so we can, but no matter what we start with, whether it's something with your preferences from historical contracts or a standard, we can iterate on it with your feedback. So we'll see what you ultimately agreed to, or ultimately what version of the document you sent back to the counterparty. And then we'll update the instructions so that you don't have to make those changes again. I think a lot of times with the models directly, they don't know how to layer in any feedback that you give. And that it kind of forgets everything or can over-index on some small thing that you did. And so what we find is we need a process for updating these playbooks in a way that's really efficient and really intuitive and is different for every client out there. And that's why I think the models are going to continue to struggle with learning what they need to learn to be fully customized without a memory bank that is really flexible and works across different types of clients.
So I guess like when as a client, I guess like what do you think after let's say Markups AI, sorry, I'm like just literally eating the throat candy, so I can actually talk. But okay, so when I guess like when the okay, let's start with like the go-to-market side, because I feel like that's relevant to who is using this. So I would assume this is like for individual or like startup founders or people without like a lawyer team, or like maybe they have a lawyer but like they don't use it every day because of the legal cost is going to be like $1 million per year. How do you identify the market? And then the other problem is like not problem, question is like you used to be you used to sell to business, but now it's like a purely like I would say like a consumer focused company. How do you think about like the different transitions like for yourself as a founder?
Yeah, no, you're right in terms of what we started with. We thought this was going to be the early adopters were going to be small companies, startup founders, and companies that were scaling initially, similar to companies that my co-founder Sam and I had built. And there actually just wasn't much interest there. I think the biggest reason why is because early on in your journey as an entrepreneur, you don't care that much about contracts. There's not a lot of downside, and the friction of negotiating it at all is real and may not be worth the time. And then I think GPT does give a basic check and solves most early stage companies' issues when it comes to contracts. So we ended up finding our product market fit with very large clients. Our average employee count at a corporate client of ours is over 10,000 employees. And they have the most contracts. They have a huge amount of pressure to use AI to get better. And they don't want to onboard another big software platform that it has to integrate with everything else they do. And so Agent Marko fits really well into that. I think what our goal is to make it so easy and so useful across the whole life cycle of contracts. So not just the negotiation, but the ability to tell you what you need to do inside of a contract. Do you need to delete the data? Do you need to make sure that your counterparty deletes data? Do you have to do you have to renew or cancel? All of those little obligations. Right now, large companies manage that really well with their big software platforms. But is there a way to do that for smaller companies that doesn't require a big onboarding? That it's just an AI agent that's reminding you and telling you of things that you've already agreed to. I think that will be a big way we can break in with earlier stage companies. But over the last few months, we've grown a lot with 1 or 2 person legal teams, because if you're scaling and you're signing, a few customer contracts a week, you're somebody spending tens of hours on that. So getting an AI agent that can just really tailored mark it up for you, and you don't have to go to ChatGPT and prompt it and then make all the changes yourself. You can just forward an email and get back a fully marked up document. That really allows you to scale. So we've definitely been growing quickly with that segment as well. And I think we'll just more and more features of what we launch will be useful for them.
When you're thinking about like the go-to-market strategy or like, I guess like also the pricing as well, how much do you charge for the product? I remember it was like, is that $20 per month, or am I crazy?
Oh, no, not that. I think you can get Claude Cowork for $20 a month, but we would definitely go broke at that level. What we price on is ultimately usage. We have different usage tiers, and we charge for the number of custom playbooks that we make for clients. That's really where our work comes in. It's a very intensive process to build playbooks. So we offer flat monthly pricing that we base on the approximate number of contracts that you deal with and the number of different playbooks that you would want. So if you're a small business, you can usually get started for around $1,000 a month. And we don't do any per user licenses. That's we find that a true colleague would be able to diffuse throughout an organization. So it's not just a legal person using it. It's finance, it's sales, it's the C-suite. That model is, we tried every different model where we charge a certain price per document. People didn't like that because, when they send in a document, sometimes it's just a quick check. Other times it's more robust and they're trying to think, is it worth this, fee for this one document? And that's definitely not how it is with a colleague, right? You get their help, whether it's going to be quick or not quick, and it all averages out. And so that's really what we try to do with our pricing. At the same time, we don't subsidize the models like a lot of legal tech companies do, where they give, flat pricing per month per user, give them unlimited tokens, and they end up just being a 70-80% subsidy on the underlying models. We don't think that's a sustainable way to grow the business. And so we're really more charging, outcome based. This will solve your contract needs at a flat monthly price.
When it comes to since you mentioned Cloud Code, I feel like Cloud is like killing 95% of startups right now, because of like every day they're launching a new feature that's targeting a particular area that everybody has been building for. What's your thought on these incumbents who go into the legal space? Because legal has been very lucrative, and all the $100 million rounds are in the legal space essentially. So what's your thought on the competitive landscape? Do you feel like the big tech is gonna go after these kind of like legal related areas?
Yeah, it is an incredibly competitive market. it is maybe the one that's grown the fastest from a application layer of AI. Certainly legal has the ability to be transformed maybe faster than any other segment out there. Maybe customer service is the other one. And so I think the reason why it's so competitive is because there's so much opportunity. Every legal department in the world right now is looking at or using at least one AI product. So I just think that's the reality. We knew that going into this. I think what we felt was there was an opportunity to grow immediately by offering access to the models in some kind of targeted or novel way. And that was going to be a limited way that was not going to be ultimately how people would use the models. We thought they would use it in a way more structured way, ultimately what would feel more like an agent. And so there's still a massive opportunity. Like one thing we look at is that the companies that have grown really fast are generally selling to law firms. Yeah, and they have a little bit in-house, but nobody's really become a winner in-house yet. It's still a very, very fragmented market. And in law firms, in my opinion, it's been less about how much they're actually saving using AI and much more about presenting themselves as an AI forward law firm. And I think it just shows up in the data. Major law firms are billing more hours than ever at higher rates than ever. So there's been no savings passed along to the clients yet. I think in-house is where I think more and more legal work will get done. I think AI will allow these teams to do more internally than they've ever done. And I think they have a much higher bar. They're not under pressure for their clients to use AI. They're under pressure to use AI to actually save time and money. And it's AI out of the box doesn't help that much with the legal job. I think it has to be tailored to the specific workflows. And that just takes time. It takes a different level, a different type of product. So we view it as still wide open. And the vast majority of money raised has been, again, for the law firm market. That's been where the fastest growth is. But where we think the enduring growth will be is in-house.
So how much money flows into in-house versus law firm versus like individual legal department? I don't even know if that's the thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know all the numbers, but I would say they're both absolutely massive. Many tens of billions. In-house deals with routine items generally. They deal with contracts, like commercial contracts. That is where we think AI can have the biggest impact, that it can really do well on routine things. Law firms are involved in more bespoke things, litigation and M&A. These are things that it's going to be a bit harder for AI to have as big an impact on. And so we view the real opportunities in-house, not only because it's very large, but because that's where AI can help the most.
I think that's super interesting. And I wonder, so like, how is the budget approval getting made? So like for the one-person company, is that just that one legal person, or is the CEO also have to approve the budget? And then as for like the token usage, how much margin can this thing even get because of like, not this thing in particular, I'm saying in general, right? Like everybody is like, the token cost is like very, very high. 95% of the AI startups are are spending the money back to whether it's Nvidia or ChatGPT. But in general, like although like people are raising the 100 million rounds, but the margin are typically not as good.
Yeah, I think anytime you're selling access to a model, it's going to be really hard to make money because you either have to hope that they don't use it as much as they could, or that you have some discount that you get from being a provider of the model, which I don't think anybody's really doing at this point. what we're in the business of doing is selling outcomes. So we're going to give you a perfectly redlined contract. How many tokens we use to do that, you don't actually care about. So we're going to give you a flat monthly price that includes a certain number of contracts done really well. And if we do our job right, we're going to make that an efficient use of tokens so that we can make money. But I think as the models get better, as we get better, our instructions are going to get more and more efficient, use fewer and fewer tokens. And so I'd say our margins are already pretty good because, again, so much of model usage comes from correction of things, right? Like if you ask GPT to revise a document for you and or an AI provider, and it doesn't do it right, you're gonna have to follow up 7, 8, 9 times fixing stuff. That's where all the tokens get used. If you can just pass along a document and it does it all right once up front and gives it back to you, that's gonna be the most efficient use of tokens.
Is there human involved? Also, hi Simpson. I just want to say hi to the audience, but I want to say hi to the audience who comments. Like most people lurk, but I want to encourage people who comment. Okay, so I think my question was like, so how like is human involved? You mentioned about like legal engineers. Are they I would say, are they like a lawyer at a firm, and then they kind of like redline a bunch of stuff that's like, you know, the AI miss, or how is human kind of like getting involved in the process?
Yeah, and I think just going back to your question about legal engineers in general, it's a very broad term. What we mean by legal engineers are people that are training an agent on behalf of our clients, and their goal is to make it autonomous so that they don't need to be involved. And so they get heavily involved in the creation of the playbooks and the testing and the training. But then there's nobody involved from a human in the loop perspective. There's none of our legal engineers are checking Agent Marko's work before it goes out. It's totally autonomous. Our clients are the ones reviewing the work. But anytime there's feedback from the clients, then our legal engineers get involved to make sure that feedback is properly tested and actually is incorporated so that the clients don't have to give that same feedback again. We call that a human before the loop model. We think it's the most efficient way to get this to work. And it basically gives all the hardest tasks to the legal engineers of building the system to make sure it works really well while relying on pure AI to actually deliver the services. And that's very different than how other companies use legal engineers. Legal engineers are often more in a sales context, and they're more about educating the client on how to use the tools rather than educating the tool on how to serve the client. And we think that orientation is really important and different, and why engineer is the right term. Although again, I wouldn't, if you're actually an engineer, you may be feeling a little frustrated with everybody calling themselves an engineer. But our legal engineers are former practicing lawyers. I also think it's just to distinguish people that are actively practicing law and people that are working inside of technology companies and helping AI be used by lawyers internally.
How do you ensemble your own team? So since like I feel like nowadays everyone is using AI for everything, what's your thought on like ensembling like a team in today's age?
Yeah, we generally hired very experienced people, both on the legal side and the engineering side. My first company we hired, our average age was like 23 for the first couple of years. I was 22 when we started. And, a lot of people hadn't graduated college. It was basically like, if you were hungry and wanted to join this and seemed smart, like, let's go. Like, I think with this company, we felt anything that was easy, we should be able to automate with AI. So we should only hire people that are going to be able to build the systems and have a lot of experience to do that. And also, a lot of these people are people we've worked with in the past. My co-founder hired a lot of his favorite engineers from his last two companies. I think we view ourselves as going to be like a small elite team that's going to be highly leveraged by AI. So that's one reason why we haven't raised a mega round, is we've just been able to automate so much of what we do. And I think most of the money being raised for these legal tech companies is subsidizing the models, so subsidizing token use, and then on marketing. The actual products that have been built have been a small part of the spend. And I think for us, it's been almost entirely our spend so far. So right as of today, we have only legal engineers, and then me, the one non-engineer on the whole team. And I think we generally let our product speak for ourselves. But that said, we'll probably raise some money and start marketing more as well in the next year. So I can't knock that too much.
I was wondering, so like you mentioned a really interesting point that like the first company was hired with like a lot of, young and hungry people, and now you guys only hire like very experienced people. What's a core difference in terms of like management? Like do you encounter the same challenge? And then for the people who are hiring the younger people, like what would be your advice for them? Because I feel like a lot of our listeners are founders. They are probably like early on in their journey in YC or something. Like how do they kind of like manage that crew? Is there like any downside like people never seen?
Yeah, I think I learned the hard way. Like you want to hire the most experienced person that will work really hard and be successful inside of a startup. So, a chaotic organization. Like I think I tried to hire people that had amazing backgrounds from really big companies and thought, okay, great, they're going to have the experience. And it didn't translate to the chaos of a startup environment, how fast it's growing, how much it's changing. I've also hired people that had startup experience, and they come in and they're not able to take it to the next level and help the company mature. So I think you're really looking for someone that maybe is able to take your company to that next level, and you can't really skip levels. You got to go through all the gradations of getting more and more mature. I think the more experienced people you hire, the more autonomy you can give them, and that's the goal. I think sometimes young founders can either micromanage too much those experienced people or assume they know more than they do. I think a lot of it is just deep diving in the beginning and then giving more and more flexibility over time as they kind of learn and move it. I think founders also constantly underestimate when you're a fast growing early company, you have like this alien organization that nobody understands coming in. It is unlike any big company. It is incredibly overwhelming to anybody new, and you probably don't have many resources to train people. So just don't underestimate the time it takes from you and the team to help get these new people up to speed, regardless of whether they're experienced or not.
When I guess like I think it's really interesting for you to say that like it is not translating from even if you have like a big company experience, it's like really hard to feed the mold into your own company, and or like the younger people may not actually grow into something like the role requires in the future. Speaking of the current sorry. Speaking of the AI employees, how are you thinking about like whether it's a model that you guys are using or like AI tools that you're ensembling together to build Markups AI? And then also like I guess like from your past background, like since I feel like you're more towards the finance side, starting with like your background, like how do you think about like using AI as a founder yourself? Like do you go into it with um just like building the first version of product with your CTO, or like how involved are you with like the day-to-day actually building the technical product?
Yeah, one reason I was so excited about AI was because I think it allows people from less technical backgrounds to get as involved with the product as they want to be. There's not nearly this divide that there was with tools like Claude Code and Codex. And so much of what we do, our innovation is in the instructions layer, so the prompt layer. And that's something I really gravitated toward, 2 years ago when we got started. Actually 2.5 years ago. And it's something that really fit my background coming out of manufacturing. Everything you're doing is creating standard operating procedures so that, the hundreds of people on the factory floors across the country are doing the right process the same way. And creating those instructions is really key. And doing that with AI is the iteration cycles, the return on investment of getting those instructions right, and it's I think the most fascinating work that you can do. So I love doing that stuff. I spend at least half my time these days involved with that, and in addition to pounding the pavement and selling, doing lots of client pitches. I think it's really important for founders to be involved with the sale well beyond when they maybe have to be, because that's the front line where you're getting as invaluable feedback on what's landing, what's not landing, what new features do you need to develop, what should the branding really be, how are you differentiated with other things that are out there. So I think those are the, and then also as an early stage founder, you're doing lots of other stuff. You're chief admin as well, pretty much, especially when you only hire experienced lawyers and engineers that are coming from environments with lots of resources. So I think there are so many good tools out there these days, like, Pilot and Rippling, just handling all the accounting and HR. Like when I started TemperPack, there was none of that. It was far more manual, and I don't think at early stage we were able to give our employees that great of an experience. Versus now, I think with those tools, it's not a big difference between us and a much larger company from the employee experience.
I want to say hi to George. Hi, George. Okay. So, I wonder when you mentioned about like, being able to like sell, and then like also like I feel like when we're working on the book, your chapter was about fundraising. Is there anything that you would change about your advice on fundraising? Because back in time, I remember reading your chapter was like, it was primarily about like, literally just like fundraising from your ex-girlfriend vibe. Like, so it's like fundraising from everyone. But do you think like you have a different approach now, and coming second time around? And then also like as a founder, like how do you structure your day to have the momentum from the business end, but also kind of manage internal stuff?
Yeah. I think my advice was just raise from anybody you can and iterate on the pitch. And I think that was 2015. There was no such thing as a pre-seed round in 2015. There was this like, you had to raise from angels essentially before you had any traction. And that, I think fortunately today, it's just a lot easier to raise a pre-seed. There's all these VCs specifically set up, and the rounds are so much bigger right off the gate. So I would say some of that advice maybe is a bit dated at this point. That said, I do think pitching to lots of companies, lots of firms it's a helpful exercise. What I would suggest is make it very iterative. Like don't set up like 20 with the same message. Like set up a deck, set up what you think makes a lot of sense, pitch one, and then learn from it, and then iterate as much as possible between them. And I also think, when you're pitching a VC, like when you're pitching an angel, it's like, okay, like they're probably going to say no. They say no to the vast majority of things. It's their personal money. You kind of get it. When it's a VC, it's like feels a little more personal when they're like, we have this smart company that wants to give out money to everybody, and we're saying no to you. But I think it really is just a fit standpoint. And there's now so many firms that do pre-seed and seed and beyond that you do need to do the numbers just to make sure you find the right fit. But I think iterating on the message is really important as well. What was your second question?
Structure your day. So like, how do you structure your own day?
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, I always try to take a half hour just to write in like a work diary and just think through what are the biggest priorities. What have I missed? I think so much of the day is reactive and trying to get stuff done. And as a early stage founder, you're executing and you have to make sure so many things get done. But that can't be your only job. You also have to be strategic and taking time to really take a step back and be like, are we working on the right things? Being your own boss means holding yourself accountable as well and saying, what did I not do well? What do I need to do better? And I learned doing that the hard way. Like for years at TemperPack, it's just, there's so much to do that all I would do is like knock stuff out. But then you can really lose sight strategically where you are and where you need to change. And especially in this competitive of an environment, that's really important. And then I also just think checking in with the team, like managing people. A lot of early stage founders are like, here's a problem, go fix it. And that can be really great, give a lot of autonomy, but at the same time, you also need to check in, make sure that they're doing it in an efficient way, make sure you gave clear instructions. But I love it. The reason I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur and can't really see myself doing anything else is because of how varied it is, how many hats you have to wear, and it keeps it fresh. And I would say definitely, when you're experiencing growth, it just becomes every day is really exciting.
I love that. I wonder, so like, is there something that you would give as an advice for your younger self? This is like a question I only ask you because of like, I feel like we met.
Not like the old person on your podcast. Everybody else is young.
No, not that. It's just literally just like, I feel like I know you from like 10 years ago, so I feel like this thing is like the reflection thing. It's like definitely super important.
Yeah, well, I'll phrase it this way: what advice I wish Grace had given me 10 years ago when you met me. I think the roller coaster of starting and scaling a company it's incredibly emotional. The wins feel so epic, and the losses you take really hard and personally. And that's not all bad, but it can definitely, it's just usually not totally accurate. And I think seeing things clearly has a lot of advantages when you're scaling a business. Being able to understand like, okay, we won this massive customer. That's huge. But that is actually a relatively small brick in ultimately what we're building. So let's celebrate that. Let's be really happy, but let's not treat that like it was the end all be all. I think so much of early company motivation for me was like, okay, if I can just do this one thing, I'll just put everything I can into getting this one customer or getting this new product out, and everything will be great once I do that. And the truth is, it's not like that. It's always something right after that you have to jump into. And if you're not, you're probably missing an opportunity. So I think being more clear-eyed that the losses and the wins are actually just kind of scores, like daily or weekly scores that are comprised of a much larger pattern. And then to just, when you realize that, not only is it more accurate, but you can start to just enjoy the experience for what it is. I mean, any co-founder out there could be working at a company and they're only doing this because they wanted to do it. And you can forget that you signed up for this sometimes. And so I would say this time around, just a lot more grateful to get to do this, get to do something I've always wanted to do, and not letting the highs get too high or the lows too low.
That's such a great message, just because I feel like it is like you said, like the high may not be actually the high, like because there's always like a hurdle that you have to climb next time.
Yeah.
And then it just like never stopped. And I feel like it's really brave for you to start a second company after a company. I feel like it's a lot of work that you have to really go through again. As you know, you are the CEO, but you're also the janitor and like administration and like everything else. So I'm curious about like your thoughts on like going through this journey. Like, is there like anything that you are doing differently than the first time beside the hiring part that like, you know, obviously you are hiring younger people, now you're hiring more experienced people. What are something that you've done similar or different this time around, basically?
Yeah. I invested more in back office. I kind of viewed it as like last time, who knows how long this company will be around. I don't need to look at the mail. As long as employees get paid on time, everything else is kind of not that important.
Mhm.
And I definitely have more of an appreciation for how important the employee experience is, and making sure that we are a professional organization from day one. Again, it's a lot easier with all the tools that have come out. But I think I just have a better sense of what that looks like. And everything from like employee reviews to, all your resources for benefits, and is it easy to ask questions about vacation and policy, like all these things that, was the last thing on my mind for the first few years at TemperPack, I think is more important this time around. But a lot of it is just, with TemperPack, so much went well that a lot of it's just like, okay, what did we do in this circumstance? Like, how can we make sure that we also respond really well?
Mhm.
And so I would just say this time around, it feels like I'm just guessing a lot less. I mean, in the first time around, when you're 22 and you're growing, from 0 to 100 million in sales in a few years, it's you're just constantly flying by the seat of your pants and guessing. And this time around, it just feels like I have a better sense. And also, my co-founder Sam scaled a company to $1 billion of sales, and he's has a lot of experience along the way too. So
Wait, how do you meet your co-founder?
we were friends in college. So he was a engineer in college, computer science, and in addition to Wharton, he was an M&T at Penn, and I was at Wharton undergrad. And I'd say of our friend group, we were the two people very interested in startups. Even back in 2013, there wasn't nearly as much interest in startups at Penn
Yeah,
or
100%.
in general. And now it's very different. It feels very normal to just be like, yeah, I'm going to start a company after college. Like at the time, that was like weird, and people were like, oh, I guess you can't get a job. And it's awesome to see how normal that's become, and how so many of the coolest companies are being started by very, very young people now.
For sure. Our core fellows for my fellowship are at Penn. A lot of
Okay.
them, I would say like 5 out of the 11 people are at there. Like we have like more people coming, but like I feel like it's definitely like one of the more active group of like entrepreneurs where the most like entrepreneurial students are at.
Yeah.
Um, so when you were thinking about like AI trends, um, we can talk about we can't end this podcast without talking about AI. So what
Sure.
would be one AI trend that you are most excited about?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think there are so many cool applications coming out. In my view, the models got a lot smarter with the reasoning that came out, and then with Gemini 2.5 Pro, that was a big improvement last March. And since then, there's been real improvements, but it's been way more incremental, at least with our applications. It has not fundamentally changed our approach in the same way that almost every version of the model did for a couple of years. But now that it's kind of almost leveling off, there's so much you can do with it when you apply it, and when you create instructions that can channel it. And I think our application is just one where it's going to be a totally different experience than working with a chatbot, when you get to have a real AI colleague that can just handle contracts and has been specifically trained on all sorts of different things that can come up. it's going to be 10 times, 100 times more useful than the models directly. And it's going to be made up of a DNA of data and model and instructions. And I think that's going to be the case across so many companies. It just takes a long time to build that. It wasn't even possible until maybe a year ago. And it's a very complex thing to build, but I think it's going to be incredibly useful. I'm also excited for the models to come out this summer. I think everybody's talking about how they are going to be a different level, maybe another breakthrough, like the reasoning models were, with everything being trained on the Blackwell chips. And some people think, the models we're using now were just the bridge. Reasoning kind of helped you get an improvement, but we're going to go back to just the foundational models being so much smarter with these dedicated chips. And very excited to see. I mean, it's hard. It's hard for me to look at the next 5 to 10 years and not think we're going to get to the point where AI is doing most of the routine things that people do today. And that doesn't mean we won't find other things for people to do, but it just means it's going to be totally transformed in the next 5 to 10 years. And it's super exciting. It's awesome to get to be a part of that.
For sure. I want to be mindful of time. Maybe we wrap with a quick 1 minute fun run. What's your favorite book?
The Rise of Theodore Roosevelt.
Who would you invite to your dinner party?
Oh man. I can't say Teddy Roosevelt again. Does it have to be a living person or not?
It's your party.
Oh, okay. All right. I would invite Thomas Edison.
Love that. Who made the biggest impact in your career?
I would say my co-founders at TemperPack, James and Charles. We probably never would have jumped into this without them, and they were crazy enough to do this with me, and we went through a bunch of highs and lows together, and it's awesome to see they're still entrepreneurs as well.
For sure. Where can we find you outside of work?
Playing pickleball, running, biking. I live in Sausalito, so basically when I moved out to the Bay Area a few years ago, it got a whole new felt like a whole new identity, because started an AI company as you do when you move to the Bay, and then also started biking and hiking and all these things that on the East Coast are only vacation.
Yeah. Damn, you sound so San Francisco right now. I can't.
I know. My wife's from the Bay Area, so she converted
you.
Yep. It's awesome. I love living here. It's hard to ever imagine leaving at this point.
I love that. Well, Brian, thank you so much for coming to the show. It's been such a crazy 10 years.
Yes. Yeah, we'll have to do it more often. Otherwise, next time we talk, we'll probably be in VR or some, maybe in space or something.
Oh my God, crazy. Thank you so much. Let me quickly end stream 1 sec.